ora, I'm Nadine Higgins and welcome to your personal finance podcast, The Prosperity Project. On this podcast, I'm on a mission to empower you financially. I am a columnist and a journalist, an investor, a financial advisor, and the mum of a toddler, but I do not claim to be the font of all knowledge. I'm still figuring it out too. And that's why I'll be bringing you the experts and mining their big brains for all the things you and I need to know every week. March 31st marks the end of the financial year, and while that doesn't mean all that much for the average employee, it may mean you are due for a pay review. And salaries are a big topic right now, specifically how salaries in New Zealand compare to those overseas, with so many young Kiwis in particular leaving the country. So if you are booked in for a pay review in the coming weeks, what can you do to try and improve your pay? To talk more about salaries, I'm joined by Robert Walters Australia and New Zealand Chief Executive Shay Peters. And just a quick note on this episode, Shay's earpods died partway through, so if you notice a change in the sound quality, that's why. Peters. Kia ora, Shay.
Kia ora, how's it going?
Good, thank you. I am wondering though, given it's a tough economy, unemployment is rising, the cost of living is down, or at least moderating a little bit, how many people, according to the research you have done, are actually expecting a pay rise this year? And how does that compare with the number of employers who are planning on dishing them out?
Well, both numbers are actually at an all-time low. When I say an all-time low, probably what I actually mean is a recent history low. So about 62% of New Zealand businesses are likely to provide salary increases this year, which is definitely low compared to previous years. The interesting thing about this is only 57% of employees are actually expecting to receive a salary increase. And that is definitely down from previous years. So what we are seeing there is recognition from the employee market or the labour market that times are tough for employers, and the cost of living is not the only rising cost at the moment, but the cost of business is also rising.
Do employers in general, when the economy isn't so weak, tend to give out pay rises every year? Can we expect to be having that? Because our cost of living as an employee goes up every year, but can we expect one every year?
In typical markets, yes. I mean, typical markets, we see a rising cost of living, and CPI adjustments are typically provided by most organisations that we work with. So normally, at the very least, you could expect a salary increase that might match CPI, but that hasn't been the case in the previous 2 years.
I also see you've got a stat in there that only 10% of us believe we are earning what we're worth. Is that just because we all believe we're worth top dollar, or is there something for employers to really worry about there?
Both things, actually. I think people genuinely always believe they're worth more than what they're getting paid. I think that's probably innate in people's brains, basically. They have that inherent confidence. But I think at the moment, this is heightened by the fact that there has been a lack of material pay rises over the past 2 years. So I think that's compounding things. The worry for employers here is that if 90% of people believe they're not earning enough or not earning what they're worth, when the market starts to moderate or starts to slowly turn, that could send a signal that employees will dash to the next opportunity. The flow-on effect from that is a loss of productivity. And we all know productivity is one of New Zealand's major challenges at the moment.
So that sort of 90% of us who think that we are underpaid, is that reflected in the statistics like the number of people leaving the country?
The number of people that are looking to leave is definitely a high from recent years. We haven't seen this level of geographical movement or willingness to relocate before. Interesting thing around this is it's not just overseas. People are also willing to look at regional moves within New Zealand for a better earning opportunity. But it is concerning that of the 67% of employees that are looking to relocate, 42% of those are looking for a move to Australia. Now, this is a bit of a change from what we've seen. The biggest concern around the 42% is who makes up that 42%. So normally we know that young New Zealanders travel. They're transient. A lot of us have done it. And we've moved abroad, gained good experience, and have been able to bring that experience back to New Zealand. The concerning thing here is the demographic of people that are looking to relocate specifically to Australia. we're looking at senior subject matter experts or mid-level managers. Now, those are people typically with families. Now, if those individuals are looking to relocate, it's likely they're relocating for good. So they're not going to be able to bring that experience back. And I think that's a major concern for New Zealand at the moment.
So the brain drain is properly back. This isn't just people going on their OE. This is people pulling pin on the country.
That is my concern. And we know, as I mentioned before, the number one challenge for GDP growth in New Zealand is productivity. And if we see the subject matter experts leaving the country, the ones with the knowledge and experience, then that's only going to be heightened. So that should be on the government's radar. I know it is, but I'm not sure what the plans are to stop that trend.
Salaries obviously aren't the only thing that we use to determine whether we stay or go in a job. You know, there's the job satisfaction, there's the workplace culture, there's the flexibility. But where in the list of priorities does salary sit?
It's number one. And it typically always sits at number one. There's all the other factors that come into play. Flexible working has now risen through the ranks. But like you say, workplace culture, that's something else. And other opportunities around organisations being willing to provide opportunities for learning and development and progression. They're all factors that employees look at when they're weighing up whether to move or not. But salary typically is always number one. And at the moment, it is very much number one.
Yeah, because we don't go to work as a charitable exercise, right? We do it to fund our lives. And so, of course, it sits at number one. Interesting figures around inflation. 39% of employees are feeling their pay doesn't keep up with inflation. And 22% of employers agree. If the employers agree, why aren't they changing it? Are they just strapped for cash?
I think it comes back to the way the New Zealand economy is made up and the size of organisations we have working within our ecosystem. So if we think about the way that New Zealand business society is made up is mostly small to medium-sized enterprise. And we know the cost of business is rising considerably as well. They don't have the ability to absorb a whole lot of salary increases. Otherwise, they're going to be put under real pressure. Profit lines are already being put under pressure, and a lot of organizations are trying to break even at the moment or just survive. So they just don't have the ability to be able to absorb salary increases across their labor force. If we look at larger organizations at the moment, sometimes larger organizations do have the ability to absorb salary increases, but we're now 2 years into this downturn. So I think probably in the first year, it might have been okay to absorb salary increases to keep employees appeased. But we're in year 2 now, and I think things are really tightening. Even in multinational environments, I just don't think there's an ability to absorb a 3 to 4 to 5% salary increase on your wage bill. So I think there's some real pressure in New Zealand at the moment.
I have definitely been in jobs where times have been tough, where I have gone years without asking for a pay rise, let alone getting one. Does that make me a mug? Should I be asking regardless? Or is there something to be said for an employee who's like, well, do you know what? I know the business can't afford this.
Oh, look, I as an employer myself, I would love that kind of personality working for me day in, day out, but that's just not the reality that we live in at the moment.
So what you're saying is I am a mug. I should have been
possibly.
asking.
Could have been. Yeah, possibly that's something for you to think about in the future. But if we think about, I think this is a generational difference here as well. So there are generational pressures amongst this. And I think we're now in the mode of the generations that are coming into the workforce, everything is they value immediacy. Everything is give it to me first and then I'll do the job later. So there's that generational element coming through as well. So that's putting pressure on employers too.
And I guess they're all trying to hold on to talent, because if people are pulling pin and leaving the country, you've got to hold on to the good ones while they're here. And yet if your cash flow's under pressure, that's quite hard to do. So it sort of seems like a rock and a hard place.
I haven't seen the economy like this. So this is my third downturn working within the recruitment sector and in the labour market. So I initially, I started my career working in London, and about 6 months later, Lehman Brothers crashed and the whole world changed overnight. And we saw pressures come on, significant pressures. There were redundancies during that period in certain sectors, but that was a finance-based downturn. Then we went into COVID, which was like this spike of fear amongst employers, no one knowing when they were going to come out of this. So we didn't see as much wide-scale redundancy, but we did see moderate redundancy. Now we're in the second, or we've finished, in my opinion, the second lot of 12 months in the current cycle that we're in. And at the moment, I don't think anyone's seeing a fast way out of this. So previously, that was a finance system scenario, so that was fixed. Secondly, basically an injection kind of fixed the next downturn. But at the moment, I don't think anyone's there's no magic wand to fix this one. So I think we are going to be under pressure. And also, when we do come out of it, I don't think it's going to be quick. I think it's going to be a slow and gradual return to normality.
We are just going to take a quick break, but after the break I want to talk about some strategies, because if you are going to get that pay rise, there are ways to go about it and presumably ways not to go about it. So we'll get back into that in just a moment. Welcome back to the Prosperity Project. We're talking salaries with Robert Walters, Australia-New Zealand Chief Executive Shay Peters, and we're going to turn our attention now to how to improve the chances that you can get a better one. And I'm guessing, Shay, there are ways that are more likely to work and ways that could also thwart your chances. I know that one thing people often say is get leverage, go somewhere else, get a job offer, take that back to the boss and be like, give me a pay rise or I'm out of here. Like, is that a legitimate strategy or is it a bit of a risky one?
Oh, we've seen that in the past when the labour market's a little bit more buoyant. But I would say that would be an incredibly riskier one at the moment. I think a lot of organisations are trying to hold on to their talent. They're not wanting to go through redundancies, but let a sinking lid or natural attrition help them get back to an equilibrium. So if someone came to them and said, give me a pay rise or I'm out,
they might
the employer may think, the employer may think that's just lowered my cost of doing business.
So it better be a real offer if you have genuinely taken that to the boss.
Yeah, look, 100%. I think in the markets that we saw previously, so if we're thinking about 21 and 22, that is definitely reality. And a lot of candidates had multiple offers, so not just one other offer, but they took their skills out to market and they could have had 2, 3 or 4 offers on the table. So then they had genuine leverage. But I just don't think we're in that kind of market at the moment.
Is there a financial penalty, though, do you think, for staying with the same organisation for too long, that if you don't constantly test what your market rate is, you may well be paid under the market rate?
It can be a genuine reality. I think that, if you're working in one organisation for a while and you don't look at a lateral move, then what you can do is get stuck in a little pay rise cycle, right? So you might only be getting cost of living every now and then, or you may be getting a slight bumper, but very seldom do you get the kicker. You typically get the kicker when you move laterally in a buoyant market. At the moment, if there is a job opportunity that's out there and it's real, there may be an opportunity for a material pay rise. So that is something to consider. I would just be wary around the way things are currently.
So if you are staying put, we're not going to market because the market's a bit quiet in your industry. If you're going to your employer, what are the things you need to do before you book that meeting, before you sit down in front of them and make your case?
Yeah, sure. The biggest thing is know what you're worth in the market. So what an employer will respect is a employee that's done their research. So what an employer doesn't want to see is someone coming in and saying, look, and laying the fist down on the table and giving some kind of ridiculous number, which both parties know is unrealistic, because you're not going to get any form of respect or credibility in that conversation there. So you've got to know what you're worth. That's the first thing. I think secondly, when you're going into that conversation, you just need to be really open and honest around how things are. So if you're talking to the employer and saying, look, cost of living is obviously increasing by X%. I haven't had a pay rise this year. I'm looking for a pay rise. What is reasonable? What do you think the organization is able to afford? What does the organization need from me in return to be able to warrant this pay rise? So it's making sure you're entering a two-way dialogue.
So is it about offering what you will do in exchange for a pay rise, or should you be laying out on the table what you have been doing, that is adding to the bottom line or above and beyond your current pay rate?
It's both. I think that showing what you've done is extremely important, especially if you've gone above and beyond and if you're added value to the organization. I think that's worthwhile bringing to the employer's attention. But also, I think having a look and being progressive and saying, but this is what I think I can do for you in future. You're much more likely to get a better response from the employer if you're going into that conversation with well thought out dialogue, and not just demands.
Traditional negotiations would say you kind of would, go high and try and negotiate down to where you actually wanted to be. But do you run the risk of them laughing you out of the room or thinking that you're greedy and undermining that process?
Yeah, what you don't want to do is lose the trust of your employer. And I think making sure that you're reasonable, and that's why I mentioned before, know what you're worth. If you want to add a little premium onto that when you're going into that conversation, that can be a negotiation tactic, but just make sure it's realistic. Like I said before, the last thing you want to do is go into that conversation, put an outlandish figure on the table, and your employer completely loses trust in you.
Can you do the reverse though? Because I want to tell you a story about a pay negotiation I had. I had a meeting with my boss and he said to me, I'm going to be honest, I think you're underpaid. And I was like, of course, yes, absolutely. And he said, but I want you to tell me how much you think I should adjust your pay by. And I promise whatever you say, I'll still give you the figure that I was thinking of and put it in the context of the economy and the market and all of those things. And I sort of puffed up my chest and said, at least 7%. And he said 20. So can you undersell yourself?
Yes, of course you can undervalue yourself. But again, I think it goes back to understanding, I understand that what the economy is doing at the moment, but I think doing your research and knowing what you're worth on the open market, I think that's a better litmus test than just thinking about a percentage. If we get stuck in percentages, then all of a sudden, if you went to your employer and said, I want a 20% pay increase in normal times, I guess, or in a normal society, I think you get laughed out of the room. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean,
I think you were very lucky.
I have full respect for him that he was honest with me because he could have got away with paying me a 7% increase, right?
But also what the employer did there is he's gained your loyalty.
Absolutely.
And I think, and that's absolutely crucial. So he's gained your loyalty and trust. And I think that you will therefore, probably, if someone came to you or tried to hit on you in future, you would think about what your employer did for you then. Because one of the biggest drains in any organization is attrition. So once you have attrition, that severely impacts productivity. You lose institutional knowledge. You've got to go out to market. You've got to hire someone in, sometimes at a higher salary level. You may have to pay a recruitment fee on top of that. All of these things. And then you've got to get the person trained and up to speed. So it's actually, you go backwards rather than forwards, even if you do get a like for like replacement. So I think what the employer did was smart, and he buys that loyalty, but it also helps both parties moving forwards.
This might come back to my own muggery that I mentioned earlier in our interview, but is there something to be said at the moment when you're aware that job security is brittle at the moment for just keeping your head down and being grateful for having a job?
That's what I'm doing, to be honest. I'm certainly not putting my hand out for a pay rise at the moment. I mean, obviously it depends on industry, because some industries are counter-recessionary, right? So they can still be busy, they can still be productive and generating profit. But if you're in an industry that's challenged, I think staying below the radar is probably your best bet.
Overperform and try not to be too demanding.
Because there's nothing surer than the market will come back. It's just when it's going to come back. So I think that just making the biggest thing I think at the moment for people, like you mentioned before, is job security. We see unemployment on the rise in New Zealand. It's getting to a concerning figure, I think. So I think what you want to do is just make sure you get job security, get through this cycle. Once you're through the cycle, we've already seen through, what the data is telling us. And the data is telling us that a lot of employees are willing to make a move if they get a better offer. As soon as the market gets back to some form of moderate level, everyone's going to be off. They're going to be off looking for a pay rise. So it's got to be making sure that people are taking a balanced approach to this.
So then what is your advice to the business owners, perhaps especially those small and medium-sized ones, who probably agree that their employees worth more, but they simply can't pay it at the moment, but they also don't want to lose them? They probably hate pay negotiations as much as your average terrified employee walking into that room.
I think they've just got to be thinking about what else can they put on the table that's not going to cost them too much in terms of dollars. There's lots of other factors at the moment they can be thinking about, lots of other options. So obviously, a couple of options that immediately come to mind the ability to work from home, or flexibility, and they are two different things. Flexibility is typically around working hours and the flexibility to work around things that you need to do, maybe coaching sports teams, and maybe doing school drop-offs, etc. So that's something they can put on the table as flexibility. They may have the ability to offer an extra day from home. And we know employees in New Zealand value that post-COVID. So there are a couple of things that don't actually cost you money, but you might be able to retain staff. There might be also the opportunity to talk through career progression and showing a pathway for someone where you're not able to offer a salary increase at the moment, but actually provide them a concrete pathway for movement forwards in the future. Because that's also, we know progression is highly valued by the labour market. And I guess another thing that people could be thinking about is an opportunity to offer further learning and development. If you've got experts in your workplace, you could set aside times to offer learning and development opportunities to more junior staff to allow them to upskill, so that if the market does turn, then they are a more valued prospect on the labour market as well. So there's many options that you can put on the table to try and keep someone. At the end of the day, we know salary is number one, but if we know salaries across the board aren't rising, try and be a little bit creative with the other things that are at your disposal.
Well, look, you've offered some great advice. What I've learnt, Shay, is don't listen to me when it comes to negotiating salaries, but do listen to you. So thanks so much for your time on the Prosperity Project.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to the Prosperity Project. You can follow this podcast on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts, and please do chuck us a rating or a review while you're there. For more personal finance and business content, head to nzherald.co.nz, and please do feel free to get in touch with your questions and your stories. nadine.higgins at nzme.co.nz. A reminder, though, that this podcast is informational only, and nothing we say here should be considered personalised financial advice. But also remember that while listening to this podcast is hopefully going to be additive to your financial knowledge, and that is fantastic, knowing stuff doesn't create change. Doing stuff does. So what action are you going to take today to make your life more prosperous? My producer for this episode is Ethan Sills. Sound engineer is Richard Martin. I'm Nadine Higgins. Thanks for listening to the Prosperity Project.